2021 was a wild year in the world of cybersecurity, and given how pretty much everything else in the world went last year, it wouldn't be an unfair assumption to assume that 2022 will carry a lot of curveballs as well. Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 cyber threats of 2022. And if you're watching this and you need to catch up on what happened in 2021, stay until the end of this video and I will link you to just the video that you need to see. Let's dive right in. Number 3, ransomware. Ransomware is nothing new. 2021 certainly showed that threat actors are becoming as willing to use it as ever though. REvil, a threat group that made itself famous for ransomware, had itself quite a year last year, launching ransomware attacks against JBL Foods and getting quite the payday from that, and against managed service provider Kaseya. It's not like other threat groups necessarily needed to know this information, they likely already knew, but REvil showed that ransomware is certainly still a lucrative game for cyber criminals and threat groups around the world. It also showed to businesses and other organizations that you can really skate by on cybersecurity for so long. That's not to imply that either Kaseya or JBL Foods were skating by on cybersecurity, but if you are skating by on cybersecurity, it's definitely something to be concerned about. Last year, we also saw that critical infrastructure can be under threat from ransomware with the Colonial Pipeline attack. This had a huge impact on the US East Coast, preventing millions of Americans from getting gas throughout the time that this attack was ongoing. So the question remains, will cyber threat groups try to leverage ransomware against critical infrastructure for attempted increased payouts, or will they target supply chain vendors for increased payouts or reach to the various clients? Because of the uncertainty and frankly the inevitability that ransomware attacks will happen again, I'm putting this as the number 3 threat for this year. The second threat for 2022 to keep your eyes out for is supply chain attacks. Now 2020 ended with SolarWinds and we have been dealing with the fallout ever since. And in 2021, we saw the Kaseya attack. Now I understand that Kaseya isn't necessarily a vendor the same way that SolarWinds is. SolarWinds is a company that provides a product, Orion, which is a network monitoring tool, to tons of different clients, whether they be private entities or government organizations. Kaseya, however, is a managed service provider, meaning that they provide a service to these kinds of clients. However, it is because of their clientele and because they have so much insight to their clients as part of the trusted vendor to client relationship, I'm including them in this conversation, and other kinds of MSPs. So in 2022, I believe that supply chain attacks are definitely something to be concerned about. And I don't even necessarily mean a fresh attack on the supply chain. It could be continued fallout from SolarWinds or Kaseya. So if you're watching this and you don't know necessarily why attackers would target links in the supply chain, well, it's because their potential access can balloon and exponentially depending on the target. In the case of SolarWinds, they were able to pretty much poison Orion, that product that I mentioned earlier, and entire versions of that product were sent to various vendors across the SolarWinds ecosystem. That means that the attacker not only had access to SolarWinds, they potentially had access to various clients that SolarWinds works with. In 2022, threat actors may continue this trend and attempt to gain access to large swaths of companies and other organizations around the world by targeting elements of the supply chain. That can be particularly useful for them whenever a particular client is secure but the vendor is not, so they can exploit that trust between vendor and client and gain access that way. Not good. Now the potential for disaster and the scale at which this can occur, as well as unfortunately just like the ransomware point, it really leads me to make this the number 2 cyber threat of 2022 to keep our eyes out for. Now before we go to the number 1 cyber threat of 2022, you should hit that like button because we are here to appease the YouTube algorithm. If we fail to do so, that actually might become the number 1 threat of 2022. Now what's the number 1 threat? I think it is nation states. And why do I think that? Well, really look at the state of the world and look at the capabilities that nation states have, as well as their willingness to act on those capabilities. Really, this should be a no-brainer, but I totally get it if you don't know, if you don't understand. So let's unpack this a little bit more. Consider the nearly limitless resource pool that nation states have to work with, especially, near peer adversaries like Russia or China. The funding, the hardware, the amount of people and brain power that they can deploy at any given point to achieve any particular result, it's a problem. Now let's go through the top 3 nation states that I think we should be concerned with. The first would be Russia, and this is of particular concern around Eastern Europe or around Ukraine, as they are increasingly building up logistical support for a potential military push into Eastern Ukraine. Now we can unpack Why that is all happening, I'd love to, frankly. And if you want that, just let me know in the comments, but we'll just stop there and say that that is kind of the theater that they would look to influence real world operation. They also have a number of threat groups already active that are attached to the GRU, their military intelligence, or the SVR, their foreign intelligence, or even the FSB, their domestic intelligence services. They also have a huge amount of cyber threat groups operating within Russia that are part of criminal organizations. Groups like REvil operate within Russia that the Russian government is willing to look the other way on as long as those groups don't target Russian infrastructure themselves. Now let's also shift a little bit more to the east and look at China. And their particular area of interest with China in 2022 will be Taiwan. And the probability of action increases if Russia acts in Ukraine. Now, like Russia, they also have active cyber threats that operate attached to their intelligence organization and military. They're also willing to look the other way with criminal groups operating within their borders, again, just like Russia, as long as those groups don't target China. Now, another nation state that is slightly different from Russia and China would be North Korea. They've already pulled off some pretty huge cyber attacks like the Sony attack several years ago, but their primary goal in cyberspace appears to be money. And that really is one of the reasons why I am concerned that North Korea would try to utilize the trends that we've seen last year and utilize the third and the second potential threats for 2022 that we've already outlined: ransomware and supply chain targeting. That would not only grant them potential access to their own adversaries, but also allow them to potentially get massive payouts. Now, due to all of these things, I'm putting this at number 1, and really it has a lot to do with the potential for kinetic action in any of the theaters I've listed above. And again, if you're confused as to why exactly that is or what's going on and you want more information on that, let me know down in the comments. I am more than happy to provide more context on those issues. Now, if you missed the 2021 recap, check out the top video that'll have everything that you need to know about the most impactful cyber attacks of 2021. And if you're watching this and you really want to protect yourself, check out the bottom video, starting with your passwords. As always, be sure to like this video to appease the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe, because really for this channel, 2022 could be a hugely exciting year, and I want you to be along for that. So with that, I'll see you all next time. Bye.